I just remembered that when I'm making those first 2 stitches on that row before, to just loosen my tension a little bit so that I've got enough give to be able to make 2 stitches and pick up the yarn in between those stitches. So, and then what happens, it doesn't really make a difference because the gauge is so fine. If you look really close, there's a teeny tiny little hole where the 2 stitches go, but you really can't see it. And it's like right there. You really can't see it, and it doesn't show when you wear it.
Mm-hmm.
At all. No, you're not going to be able to see it because you can't see it. So, if you were to do that same thing with bulky yarn or bigger yarn, you would see that hole, and it would not work well for the pattern. But at a scale that's this tiny, it makes no difference at all, and it works out great. And it just means that you can follow that pattern right around.
What kind of an increase did you use? Do you remember?
Well, I did make one left and make one right.
Okay.
And I did the increased row and then 4 rows and then an increased row. I wrote the pattern down I belong to another knitting group, and I wrote the pattern down for them at not at the teeny tiny scale, but at a scale that people might want to make, which was the fingering weight yarn.
Sock yarn, yeah.
One. And
Love it.
If people want it, I'm more than happy to share it.
I would love it.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
I would love that. Could you share that?
I will share it.
Me too.
So Susie and I talked about this before. So if you want the pattern, I'm going to tell you my email, and it's kind of weird. So have a piece of paper to write it down.
Hang on, let me get a paper.
Okay. And I will send it to you if you email me.
Okay.
I like the pinky idea to prevent.
It's
too.
Yeah.
And I wore the brown pair for the entire time that I was knitting the blue pair. And they work great. And I could just imagine, oh, it's a cool morning and I've got to go out to the barn and milk the cows, and whatever chores you had. It's shorter. It's shorter on your hand, this way than some modern ones are, but it gives you absolutely free use of all your fingers. You don't want, like I've got some modern pairs that I've bought, where they come all the way up here, and then that doesn't make a good work glove. So these, I think, suit their purpose really well.
Free milking ability.
I have a pair that I flip down the top so I can knit, so they'll stay out of my knitting. But but you can see where having a shorter length would be really useful.
Yeah.
Maybe their fingers were, because as generations and generations progress, I know from school, those kids are big, man. They're 6th graders are bigger than me. Maybe everyone's hands and fingers were smaller.
Looking at the gloves in person, I don't think that is the case, because the proportion of them, that the width of them and whatever is pretty comparable to a modern hand. So probably, I think it's just to provide warmth for your hands without getting in the way.
So I'm sorry, do you think these are about from the 1400s?
No, these are shakers. These are from the 1800s.
Oh, shaker. Okay. Thank you.
These are shakers. So the Met's tag just said 19th century. They don't know a date. It says 19th century from the Mount Lebanon community. So
okay. Thank you.
That's as much information as they gave, and I haven't gone back to them yet to find out if there's any more information that they know that they just didn't put on their label.
One of the things that we run into a lot is that the Shakers were living their spiritual lives and taking good care of each other with zero intention of becoming the subject of a museum in the future.
Exactly. Exactly.
They kept such careful records about exactly what you needed to make the yarn because they needed to know. But they didn't, they put the initials on them so they knew who they belonged to, but they didn't think to provide anybody any information.
And that's, that's the same in any of the research that I do. So you have to make a lot of assumptions along the way and then test them out and see if it makes sense after you try it and make adjustments and try it again. And that's the fun of it. To me, that's what makes this sort of experimental archaeology fun. It's figuring out the puzzle.
Karen, can you also share your photograph of those mitts?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
I will.
That would be very interesting.
And your email.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So, ready? It's RNICHOL5.
RNICOL.
And RNICHOL 5.
Oh, CH.
R Nickel 5 at nycap.rr.com. There. Yep, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
So anybody who sends me an email, I will happily send you my pattern. Now, I tend to write patterns for myself. So I do a lot of shorthand. I know what I mean. I know that I repeated this however many times. So this was the first time that I tried to write a pattern that somebody else could understand. So please, if I've left something out or something doesn't make sense, say so.
Okay.
Because for me, I make assumptions that, like I think the pattern says M1L and M1R, which anybody who knits would know what that is. But if you're a beginner knitter, you might not. So I don't have definitions and things like that. So
I found that when I wrote the pattern for this knit along, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
Trying to.
I was going to try and send it to you beforehand, just so that you could read it and give me feedback. But
Sure, it'll be.
But please, I'm more than happy to share it, and I would love any feedback if I've left something out or made a mistake.
I have a quick question. At the very beginning, you mentioned a craft that predated knitting. Could you tell us a little about what that is and how knitting goes back a long way?
No, it doesn't.
Yes.
Well,
No, it doesn't.
no.
No.
It doesn't come back as
it's all relative.
Nikki, you are screen sharing.
Okay, good, but I don't see myself, but okay, great. I've been trying. So you see me, I don't see me, but anyway, okay, sorry.
The earliest null binding artifacts that have been found date from like 1500 BC, found in I forget, it's outside Israel somewhere, one of those, Syria or one of those, I've forgotten exactly which one.
Mm-hmm.
So it really began down there, like in Egypt and that end of the Mediterranean, and it spread. Well, I say that, but there's also been found in places like Peru and Arizona, which were pre-Columbian artifacts that the Indians had done. So it's a very, in its most basic form, it's a very simple craft that more than one person figured out. But the Egyptians used it a lot in the early, like the socks from the British Museum date to about 300. It is still practiced in Scandinavia, which is why it's called null binding. It's a Swedish word and slightly different in Norwegian or Danish, but same. It means needle binding. It's basically, it's probably closer to embroidery than it is to knitting or crochet. It's done with one needle. You have to bring the entire piece of yarn through the piece that you're working on with every stitch. So you, instead of like knitting or crochet where you have your whole ball of yarn and you just keep on going till you're done, you have to keep adding on another piece and another piece. So it's traditionally always done with 100% wool that you can felt, so that you can felt the pieces together. There are some artifacts from the Egyptian area that are made out of linen. So, and I think there are also ecclesiastical gloves that are made out of linen or silk, which don't felt. So there's another little way you can join those together. But it's generally, it's done in the round. So it was used for mittens and gloves and hats and socks. Those are the things that you find it in, because it's always, when you learn it, you're always doing it on your thumb. You start the stitch on your thumb and you're bringing the needle through and then working your way around your piece, however you're going to make it. Once you're good at it, I don't keep it on my thumb anymore. I just do it in my hand, because I understand the stitches enough. And that had to be the case historically, because some of the artifacts, the stitches are very, very tiny, like the things in the British Museum. They're very tiny. So there's no way you could do those on your hand. But more modernly, you sort of work it around your thumb, and you just go and you go and you go and you go and you go. I think there's a Finnish sort of saying, and I won't get it right, but I'll give you the gist of it. That is, you know that the husband is loved if he has null binding mittens, not knitted mittens, because the null binding was much warmer. When you get it done, and then it felts up just a little bit, the air doesn't get through. Whereas knitting, unless you do something like that, while it's much, much faster to do than null binding, if it's really, really cold out, the air is going to go right through the stitches, even if you've done it, pretty tight. So it's a fun craft to do, and I like it because you can toss it in your, and I have a special antler bone needle that I use, but when I teach it, I do it with just a tapestry needle, same as I use for weaving in my ends. So you don't need anything special, and you can shove it in your purse or your pocketbook. You never have to worry about the stitches dropping off the needle, and so it's a great craft to it's very portable.